All right, welcome to the Financing Your Education webinar. This is a presentation of the New York State and CSE Partnership for Education and Training. My name is Tim, and I'll be your host for your webinar today. Our instructor will be Jeff Thomas. At this point, I'm going to mute everyone's phone to keep background noise to a minimum. If you have any questions, you can click on the raise hand button, which is at the bottom of the right, at the bottom of the screen. It's a little picture of a hand down there, so you can see that. Go ahead and click on that hand right now. Let me see if everybody can take a practice with that. Click on that hand button down at the bottom of the screen. And look at all the hands going up. Perfect. Thank you. Go ahead and click the hand again to lower your hand. You can also type any questions you have at all during the webinar in the chat box at any time. Once again, that chat box is at the bottom right-hand side of the screen. Make sure everyone is selected in the to box. Type your message to us and hit enter to send it. So as I mentioned previously, today's webinar is sponsored by the New York State and CSE Partnership for Education and Training, or as many people refer to us, simply as the Partnership. For those of you who aren't familiar with us, the Partnership is an organization that administers education and training programs for CSEA represented employees through labor management cooperation. It is funded through negotiated agreements between New York State and CSEA. The Partnership offers in-person classroom training, online learning, educational advisement services, grants, tuition benefits, labor management services, and other education and training programs, including the webinar you're attending today. In essence, the Partnership is a joint labor management organization whose mission is to promote career mobility, improve job skills, support workplace safety and health, and promote effective labor management relations. You can learn more about us on our website or by calling us directly. I'll provide our contact information at the end of today's webinar. Now that we all know a little bit more about the Partnership, let's get started with the Financing Your Education webinar. I'd like to turn the presentation over to your instructor, Jeff Thomas.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. As Tim mentioned, my name is Jeff Thomas, and I'm an advisor here at the Partnership. I've been here several years. Before this, I actually worked at a community college in academic support, so this is all very familiar to me. So today we'll be talking about the financial side of returning to school. So no matter where you are in the process, from just thinking about it to already having applied or being accepted to a program, there will be something in this webinar for you. So first, we're going to define the cost of attendance. After that, we'll give you tips to make school more affordable for you. And then finally, we'll compare the different ways that you can pay for school. I also want to provide a disclaimer. Today's topic is complex, and there's a lot to it. There's not a one-size-fits-all solution. So financing your education is going to look different for every one of you on this webinar today. We won't be able to answer questions about your specific circumstances in the time we have allotted here. Instead, what we'll be providing is general guidance, defining terms and concepts, providing general tips, and who you can reach out to with these specific questions. Ultimately, though, it's what you do with this information that matters. You are the only one that can decide how returning to school and financing your education is possible. Along the way, we'll identify some challenges to financing your education, and we'll give you the information you need to either overcome them or work around them. I will tell you where you can get assistance, but it's up to you to reach out if you need it. Our Partnership educational advisors, such as myself, are here to help you and to point you to these resources again when you need them. But you have to reach out to us first, so don't be afraid to give us a call or an email. Finally, I just want to remind you that we provided you with a couple of handouts that include more information on what we'll discuss today. I will say this more than once because we don't expect you to memorize everything we show you. The most important thing is that you just understand what financing your education entails and what some of the important terms mean and where to get the help when you need it.
So if you haven't printed those handouts yet, don't worry about it. You don't need them during class right now. However, they are attached to the confirmation email you got from the Partnership. Just check your email for that and you'll see the handouts right there.
All right, so to begin, I want to ask everyone a question. How soon do you plan or hope to return to school?
So please tell us about your plans to return to school in the chat box. Once again, that chat box is at the bottom right-hand side of the screen. If it's not open, just click the chat button there. Once the chat is open, make sure that everyone is selected in the send to area. Type your thoughts in the box and then hit enter. We have a couple of people going right away in this spring.
Great. This will be information to really jump on, yeah.
Within a year or two, a couple of people say maybe.
Yeah. No, this is a great time frame. Even if it's just in a couple months or if it's in a year, this is a great time to start thinking about it. It's never a bad time to think about financing your education. So yeah, another year from now. So this is great. Thank you. I appreciate everyone sharing your plans with us. So whether you have concrete plans, you're going to start in January, or whether you're unsure about the timeline, or even if you're just helping someone else with this process, there's something in today's webinar for everyone. Also, for those of you who are unsure, this webinar will hopefully give you a good sense of how attainable returning to school might be and give you the encouragement to achieve your goals. All right, now that we have a better idea of what your plans are as a group, let's return to our plans for the hour. You'll see this slide come up throughout the webinar, and we'll use this to track our progress through the webinar. So now we're going to start with cost. So first on our agenda, how much does school actually cost? To understand how much returning to school might cost, let's first define an important term, cost of attendance, or COA. Cost of attendance is how much it actually costs to go to school. It's composed of both direct and indirect costs. Direct costs include tuition, fees, room, and board. Now you might notice that we did cross out room and board. This is because most adults returning to education do not live on campus and instead commute to school, so they're not charged for those things. Most of you will be looking at tuition and fees as your main direct costs. Now, of those two items, tuition is the cost of your actual classes and is usually stated either by semester or by credit hour. Fees will vary from school to school, semester to semester even, but they typically cover administrative services, technology, or other miscellaneous line items. What's important to know is that tuition and fees are a package deal. Together, they are things that the school will bill you for, and they'll also be known as the direct costs. So to get a better idea of how much tuition and fees typically cost, let's narrow down our focus in on a two-year degree, typically considered an associate's degree. What do you think is the average annual tuition for a two-year degree? Is it A, $3,621, B, $5,825, C, $9,072, or D, $13,360?
So I'm having a little problem with the polling thing right now, so let's just use the text chat area to answer this question. What is the average annual tuition for a two-year degree? A, $36.21, B, $58.25, C, $9,072, or D, $13,360? Go ahead and let us know in the text chat area. A, B, C, or D. Somebody said E more, so they're going off.
I like that.
The choices.
Yeah, we kind of got answers all over the place. Everything from A to D to E. I love it. But truthfully, you may be surprised to know that the correct answer is actually A. So it is $3,621. To clarify, this is the average annual tuition for a two-year degree, which means that you would need to pay this for 2 years to get an associate's degree. It's also the national average and includes private and public institutions. We'll discuss the differences between those two types in a few minutes, but what it means is that you will find schools and programs priced both above and below this average. So this number also functions as a good benchmark. As you're looking at schools, you can compare their direct costs, the tuition and fees, against the national annual average and see how it stacks up. You can find information on the specific tuition and fees for each school on their website. This information is usually openly posted. If this number still feels intimidating, it's totally fine. Remember that we'll be talking about ways to lower the cost and get assistance later on. Okay, so let's turn our attention back to the cost of attendance. We now know that tuition and fees are your direct costs, and we have a rough estimate on the average annual tuition for a two-year degree. Remember though, cost of attendance is made up of direct and indirect costs. Indirect costs include things such as books and supplies for each of your classes, as well as transportation and childcare if you need it. It's personal to your situation and circumstances. So I'm curious, can you think of some indirect costs that are specific to you that you'll need to take into consideration when going back to school?
So go ahead and please type your ideas about indirect costs into the chat box. What are some indirect costs that would be specific to you? See what the answers are, Jeff. They're coming in a little bit slowly here, but we need to give
Doggy
people
daycare,
time.
yeah, totally. You don't want to leave your dog unattended. That results in more indirect costs. So yes, transportation, childcare, gas, I mean, that definitely adds up. Supplies, laptop, yeah. Honestly, these are things you need to basically be successful in your career. So you're absolutely right. If you don't have these things, they're definitely going to make things more difficult. So those are all great suggestions. So thank you for sharing your ideas. I mentioned a moment ago that the most common indirect costs of returning to school are transportation, as some of you mentioned, and the books and supplies you'll need for class. You'll also want to consider the cost of any childcare, pet care, and convenience foods. The actual monetary value of these indirect costs can vary depending on your situation, your program, and the school you choose. How far do you need to travel for classes? What supplies do you need for your program? And what do you have others depending on you? If you struggled with this question, take some time to sit and think about what your indirect costs might be. Think about how you live your life right now and what you typically do or are responsible for in a day. List out everything that might need to change. We've given you some space in your handouts to do this, so feel free to try it there. And while this might feel uncomfortable at first, it's a really good exercise to get a feeling of your life. The bottom line is this. The cost of attendance will vary depending on the school and program you choose, as well as your personal circumstances. We can provide you with a national average because the direct costs are more predictable and consistent. While you get assistance covering some indirect costs, it's also a good idea to create a budget ahead of time to stay on track. We've included one for you in your handouts. Now, before we move on to our next topic, we want to give you a chance. Are there any questions about cost?
So go ahead and hit us up in the text chat area. Once again, the bottom right-hand side of the screen. Make sure everyone is selected in the to field. Or you can go ahead and raise your hand. I'll take a look and see if there's any hands raised right now.
And frankly, you're welcome to save your questions as well, either to the end, or if you would prefer to talk to an advisor personally, you can always do that as well after the webinar. You can give us a call or an email. So no worries if you don't have any questions now.
Yep, so nothing in the text chat and no hands raised, Jeff, so I guess we'll move on.
Yeah, no problem. All right, so next we're going to talk about affordability. Affordability is more than just a conversation about money, though. In fact, affordability is about time, energy, money, and overall value. So in this section, we'll talk about how these considerations might impact your decisions and ultimately how to make school affordable to you.
We did get a late question there, Jeff. Is tuition the same if you do it online or you travel to the school?
So that's a really good question. Generally speaking, schools are going to differ. I've seen some that have online tuition costing more versus in person. Sometimes it's the exact same. So that's one of those situations where you're definitely going to want to check with the school to see if there's a different cost between attending online or in person. But that's a really good question and definitely something to keep in mind of how costs could potentially differ. So great question. There's no right way to return to school. Adult learners are most likely working full-time with other roles and responsibilities to balance as well. So affordability is about balancing resources based on your values and your available resources of time, money, and energy. You'll want to ask yourself questions like, to start, should I take one class or go back part-time or full-time? What pace will work best with the time and energy I have to get the most from my classes? Can I afford to pay some of it as I go, or is it worth taking out a student loan? And then how can I balance this additional workload with my family obligations? Many, if not most of you, likely work full-time. How much time in your week can you devote to attending classes and studying realistically? Remember that going back to school is more than just seat time. It's also homework, exams, and projects. So each semester can be different in the number of classes you take. You can take one class, see how it goes, and adjust the next semester, or not. Or later, you may have a very challenging class to take, or a family obligation at that time where it would be best to only take one class that semester. Just remember that you can adjust this as you go. So while getting a degree or certificate does not guarantee you a promotion or a transfer, it may be worth considering the overall time you need to complete your goals. The value of your education and the potential increased income when you finish may push you to pursue the faster track, even if it requires cutting back on other things in the short term or taking out loans. In some cases, the amount of stress or some of the things you would be missing out on in your personal life are too high a price to pay. But only you can decide if the potential return is worth the investment. So Now that we know what we need to consider, what are some ways that we can actually lower the out-of-pocket cost of going back to school? The first option you should explore is the partnership's tuition benefits program. We have another webinar dedicated to explaining how this benefit works for you, but to summarize, each benefit year you are eligible for 2 tuition benefits up to a maximum of 305 per credit, up to 4 credits. So each benefit will cover 1 course up to 4 credits. If you enroll in a targeted tuition program, such as nursing, welding, HVAC, or CDL, you may be eligible for additional 2 benefits each year as well. So a single tuition benefit could cover the direct cost of a single course, depending on the cost of your school. If your class costs more than the value of the benefit, you will be responsible for the remaining cost. Schools not participating in our voucher program will have to be paid up front by the student and then can potentially be reimbursed by the partnership once the class is completed, if the school meets the reimbursement criteria. You can always check with an advisor to see if the school is covered. So have any of you used tuition benefits before?
Just go ahead and click on that raise hand button. Let us know if anybody here today has used our tuition benefits program.
So we got, yes, at least one person has. It's possible you recognize my voice. I definitely help people with these benefits. So yeah, that's great. Honestly, I'm glad to see at least someone is using them. But we definitely encourage you to use them if you haven't. They're a really great resource to get a couple courses covered. So I am glad to see that you did respond and have used our tuition benefits program before. So thank you. If you haven't used them, you're leaving benefits on the table, and I strongly encourage you to take advantage of this benefit. So for more information on our tuition benefits program, I encourage you to take our webinar, Using the Tuition Benefits Program, when it's next offered. You can also watch a recording of that webinar on our partnership YouTube site at any time, or feel free to call the partnership and talk directly to one of us advisors.
Yes, so one of our participants here today said they've had 2 classes covered a year.
Perfect. Yes, and that's exactly how you can do it. So I'm definitely glad people are utilizing it. So another way to save on cost of attendance is to earn credits by examination. So this is another benefit covered by the tuition benefits program, so definitely something to think about. Credit by exam programs offer challenge exams that allow students to demonstrate college-level knowledge by passing an exam. So if your college approves it and you pass the exam, you could earn the same number of credits for the course as you would by being in a class for a semester or term. Now, you will need to confirm with your school beforehand to see if and for what they will accept credit by exams. And by the way, the partnership will reimburse you for the exam fee up to $350 per exam, even if you don't pass. The third way that you can sometimes cut back on cost is to choose the right school for you. Often, state and city universities of New York, also known as SUNY and CUNY schools, are less expensive than private schools. The state caps tuition at these schools, but they do tend to have higher fees. Compare costs, but remember, you really won't know the true cost of attendance until you apply for admission and for financial aid, which we'll get into a little later. Because of that, you should apply to more than one, both public and private, to see which will be the better option for you. Also, keep in mind that applying to college does cost money, typically $35 to $60 or more. So you'll want to be selective and not apply to every school. Returning to the conversation around resources, your time, energy, and money, you need to consider the pace at which you want to complete your degree. Will you go part-time, full-time, or just take 1 or 2 classes a year?
Go ahead and let us know in the chat box if you have any immediate plans to return to school. Have you considered taking maybe 1 class a semester or going part-time or full-time? Once again, that chat box is at the bottom right-hand side of the screen. Just make sure everyone is selected in the to field before you hit enter. Yeah, so someone is already thinking about it. We got part-time. Part-time is part-time. It's a good place to start, honestly, especially if you have a full-time job. But yeah, just having a general idea, okay, thinking full-time, attended by, see, but that's also a good thing to know about yourself and know how much you can handle, how much you tend to take on. So if you tend to take on more than you think you might be able to chew, just make sure you're talking to your school and advisor and that you have support to at least help you through that first semester, and then you can readjust if you need to for the next time. So yeah, it's definitely really up to you, and you can adjust it as things go.
So thank you all again for sharing. If you're unsure about the pace or you'd like to take, consider the following. If you're working full-time, how much time and energy do you really have for classes and the homework outside of that? Also, consider that going back full-time means that the costs go up. So what you're saving by going full-time is time, not money. If you go to school full-time, you'll get the degree that much sooner, but you're not actually going to pay less for the school that way. So if you're taking classes part-time, spreads it out so you can afford it and focus more on your classes you're taking, then it may be the best way to go. All right, so another option to consider is a pay-as-you-go option. This just means paying for your education as you go through each class or semester. So this option may mean slowing down your journey to reduce the financial burden rather than going back full-time or even part-time. Just take 1 or 2 classes a year. So say you decided to attend a local community college. Part-time in-state tuition is $200 per credit. Your class is, this is just an example, your class is 3 credits. You have 6 months to set aside money for tuition. How much do you need to set aside each paycheck? If your class is 3 credits, then your total bill will be about 200 times 3 or $600. If you then divide that by 6 months, that's about $100 a month or $50 per paycheck if you get paid every 2 weeks. So consider that your bank or credit union may have a short-term savings product to help you keep your college money separate and earn a little extra interest. So it's definitely worth asking about that at your bank or credit union. Also, if you were able to cover part of your class as you go, you can combine direct billing and student loans. Your school's financial aid office and bursar's office will be able to answer specifics about this. You can also contact a partnership advisor for more help breaking down the costs. So the last way to lower the cost of going back to school is to take advantage of tax credits. So education tax credits help you with the cost of higher education by reducing the amount of tax owed on your tax return. They won't save you money up front, but are still an important part of lowering the cost of returning to school. There are 2 federal tax credits to know about: the American Opportunity Tax Credit, AOTC, and the Lifetime Learning Credit, the LLC. There's also a New York State College Tuition Tax Credit. In order to claim an education credit, you must have qualified expenses, be enrolled in an eligible institution, and be an eligible student, or have the student listed as one of your dependents. So for more information on tax credits, please refer to your handouts. So let's pause here for just a moment. We've talked about a lot of ways to lower the cost of going back to school, but we want to know that everyone's situation is unique. If you've tried everything we've suggested so far, but you're still struggling to see how financing your education is possible at the pace you want, that's okay and totally understandable. The cost of living has risen a lot, and we've all seen it. If you're feeling crunched, then consider slowing the pace down to 2 classes per year and sticking to what is covered by your tuition benefits. If you're interested in more information about budgeting, please refer to the budgeting worksheet we've included in your handouts for more information. Now, before we move on to the next topic, which is getting assistance, are there any questions about affordability?
So go ahead and let us know in the text chat area if you have any questions, or you can go ahead and raise your hand right now. I'll check and see if there's any hands raised. We'll just wait a minute to see if somebody's typing a question.
Yeah.
There are no
There's
hands
a
in the
lot
air.
to this stuff. Definitely complex, so. Yes. Do masters typically cost more than associates or bachelors? Yes. A master's degree typically do. The cost per credit is usually higher as well. So this is a really good question. We do see this. Just generally speaking, undergraduate courses are typically covered with vouchers at $305 per credit, and there usually isn't a remainder due to the contracting. But with master's classes at graduate level and doctorate, the cap is $305 per credit. So anything over that is something that the student does have to pay. So in all likelihood, if you're taking graduate or doctorate courses, you may end up paying a little extra on top of whatever the voucher covers. So that's a really good question. We can speak a little more about that. I definitely advise talking to an advisor for a little more ins and outs of that part, but that is a really good question. All right. So for our final stop on the journey today, we're going to talk about where to get assistance or aid with paying for school in addition to the benefits we've already talked about. So in this last section, we'll talk about financial aid. Now, financial aid refers to a set of resources a student can use towards the cost of attending an institution of higher education. Financial aid comes in a few different forms, including grants, scholarships, and loans. It can be based on a student's financial need, merit, such as good grades or talent, or a particular area of study. The amount of financial aid that a student receives is determined through federal, state, and institutional guidelines and can vary depending on the individual's circumstances and the policies and procedures that govern those awards. We'll talk a little more about applying for financial aid in just a minute or two. All right, so for now, let's learn a little more about each type of financial aid. So, question to the audience, which of the following financial aid types do you think needs to be paid back? Grants, A, scholarships, B, or loans, C?
So I'd like you to notice that I've opened the Slido panel on the right-hand side of the screen. Take your mouse and click on which option you think is the best, or has many or more than one, A, B, or C that you feel are correct. When you're done, click send.
So which of the following financial aid types do you think need to be paid back?
We do have a couple of people answering in the chat area. They're all saying C. And as far as the poll goes, Jeff, we're 85 to 15 loans versus grants.
That is correct, loans. So loans are the ones that do need to be paid back. But grants and scholarships, you can consider those free money. So thank you for sharing your thoughts. The only item on the list that really needs to be paid back, as we said, are the loans. So grants and scholarships are free. All right, so we're going to talk about each one of these one at a time, starting with grants. So there are several grants that you may be eligible for at both the federal and state levels. We aren't going to cover these in detail because you don't have to apply for each directly. But if you do apply for financial aid, recognizing these grants will help you to better understand your financial aid package. It may also be helpful to know that there is grant funding that is specifically designated for part-time students, such as Part-Time Tuition Assistance Program from New York State. You can find a full list of grants in your handout. So many private schools also have their own grant money available. If you are eligible for these awards, they will be included in your financial aid package. Next, let's talk more about scholarships. Like grants, these are money that you don't have to pay back. They can be funded by local organizations, institutions, and the schools you're applying to for admission. Regardless of how you come across them, scholarships are a great way to help pay for school. Scholarships from outside organizations can have a wide range of eligibility criteria. Scholarships can be geared towards groups of students, such as women, parents, or military families. It's also important to read the details fully. You must make sure you are eligible to apply, but also that you understand what the award entails. Many scholarships are a one-time award, and the award amounts for each will vary. A note of caution. There are fraudulent sites and scholarships that seek to steal your personal information. Be careful about who you give your information to. Check our list of approved sites to search for legitimate scholarships. Never give out your social security number or pay to apply for a scholarship. Both of those are red flags that mean the scholarship is likely fraudulent. That said, it is well worth your time to search for scholarships. You may even find some that you feel like were made just for you. So you can find scholarships using various web-based scholarship search tools. These include, but are not limited to, Career One Stop, scholarships.com, and the College Board. All of these are great places to start, but you may find scholarships also awarded through federal and state agencies or through local and national organizations related to your field of interest. Spend some time searching the databases I mentioned here. You can find links to each one in your handouts, and for each of these databases, you can filter the results for information that is relevant to you. For example, if you know you're going back part-time, search for scholarships that part-time students will be eligible for. And remember, scholarships may have different application deadlines. If you find the perfect scholarship, but it's past the deadline, make a note to return to it again next year. Many scholarships are offered regularly each year. As a last note about scholarships, there are some truly unique scholarships out there. So if you're feeling discouraged and like there isn't one out there for you, don't give up. For example, did you know that there are scholarships for left-handed people? It's true. So if you're a lefty, check it out. There is even one for duck calling, and if you use Google, you know they love to change up their logo. So you can enter the Doodle for Google annual contest and earn up to $30,000 college scholarship. In addition to being a fun creative outlet, that would make a serious dent in the cost of achieving your educational goals. So as you can see, there are all sorts of scholarships. Now, if grants and scholarships do not cover the full cost of attendance, and they typically do not, then what do you do about the difference? One option is to pay the difference out of pocket, or with money you have on hand or can save up. Another option is to take out loans. A loan is money you borrow and may pay back with interest, and must pay back with interest, sorry. Student loans are specifically meant to be used to pay for the cost of attending school. Did you know that you can borrow up to a full cost of attendance minus your financial aid package? For good reason, many individuals are hesitant to take out loans. But let's talk about more about that in a minute. I want to get a better sense of what you know about loans now. So what do you know about the differences between federal and private student loans?
So go ahead and type your ideas about the differences between federal and private student loans in the chat box. Once again, make sure everyone is selected from the to field. Type your answer and hit enter. So type your ideas about the differences between federal and private student loans. So Angela says interest rates maybe?
Yeah, that is definitely a big one. Yep, limitations on the payment schedule. Yep. Yeah, those are good answers for sure. Yep. So typically, what it comes down to is federal student loans generally have a better interest rate. They don't have a cosigner, and they're insured. Federal student loans come as either subsidized, where the government pays the interest while you are in school full-time, or unsubsidized, where they can either pay the interest as you go back or tack it on to the loan at the time of repayment. They also offer flexible payment plans, and there is a possibility of loan forgiveness if you work in public service. So there's lots of great benefits. However, there are limits on the amount you can borrow, and you must be in school at least part-time to be eligible. This means you would have to be taking 6 or more credits per semester. Some private student loans have similar terms, but because every bank, credit union, and organization that offers these is unique, the terms are hard to predict. If student loans are not enough to close the gap between the cost and your financial aid, you may need to consider other forms of payment or assistance. Let's pause for a moment here and look at how the different financing options add up. On the left, we have the cost of attendance. Remember, this is a combination of your direct and indirect costs and will vary depending on your personal circumstances and the school or program you choose. On the right, we have the varying financing options. Starting at the bottom, we have grants from New York State, then the federal government, and your school. Next, we have scholarships, tuition benefits, and out-of-pocket, and student loans. In reality, your payment breakdowns may look very different. You may receive more aid and opt not to take loans and instead supplement by paying out of pocket. You may also opt to take fewer credits and rely on tuition benefits and small out-of-pocket costs for supplies each semester. All right, now that we've discussed some of the financial aid options, you may be wondering, how do I apply for it? The answer is the FAFSA, or the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. So how many of you have heard of FAFSA before today or filled one out?
Well, if you've heard of the FAFSA before today, or even if you filled one out, go ahead and raise your hand. Once again, the hand is that picture of the hand at the bottom of the screen. Let's see, it looks like we're running at about 70% of hands here, Jeff.
Okay, yeah, that's pretty typical. So if you have heard of the FAFSA before, or even filled one out, you've raised your hand, so you are familiar with the general process. And truthfully, the FAFSA is sort of intimidating if you've never done it before. So we're going to talk through it a little bit just to kind of put your mind at ease for those of you who don't have much familiarity with it. So the FAFSA is an application form that checks your eligibility for federal financial aid. You can apply online or by mail. Truthfully, it's usually done online now. Through the FAFSA, you can also apply for New York State financial aid, and your information is shared with any schools that you list so that they can use it to assess what aid you may qualify for from their institution. The FAFSA is meant to be a convenience for students seeking financial aid to make pursuing education possible, so it's worth your time it takes to fill out. The deadlines for federal and student aid can be found on the FAFSA website. They're typically June 30th of each year for the following academic year, fall and spring. The deadlines for colleges will vary, and you're best served checking with each school directly on that. Sometimes this information can be found online. Now, you will also need to reapply for financial aid every year that you are in school. Now, you can find out more about what you need to fill out the FAFSA on their website, and we provided a link for you in the handouts. But to summarize, you'll need some basic information. You will need your Social Security number, your driver's license number, or a federal tax information for you and your spouse if you are married. So you'll need those three pieces. If you need help, you can get it directly from the FAFSA form if you're filling it out digitally. You can also email or call the Office of Federal Student Aid with questions you may have. Finally, your school's financial aid office is a great resource as well. They oftentimes will have a financial aid advisor that can assist you with questions. So what I really want to emphasize here is that there are ample free resources for you to get help in filling out the FAFSA form, and you should never pay for help with the FAFSA. So let's take a brief field trip to the FAFSA website so that we can show you where to go and how easy it is to complete. So first, I'm going to ask the host to share their screen. So from here, you can see the center of the page has some easy navigation for you. If you're new to the FAFSA process, click Start Here. And if you're a returning user, then you'll just have to click Log In.
Sorry, Jeff, we're having a problem with the link right now, so we'll just have to stick with what's on the screen.
No worries. Yeah, so that does appear to be the landing page that we have up, so you'll see the Start Here and the Log In. But yeah, make sure you copy down your login information because you'll likely have to log in again, so don't lose it. Unfortunately, we cannot fill out the FAFSA together today, but know that you have a lot of great resources. So you can use the information provided on the website. You can reach out to the FAFSA or the Federal Student Aid directly. You can also reach out to your school if you're applying with a specific school for assistance there. First, so you can't fill out today, but we can navigate. So unfortunately, we don't have the website. This is a little difficult, but when you are on the website, though, you can find them in the navigation bar at the top of the screen. So it's pretty typical, like most websites. You can find a lot of resources up there. So first, you have the FAFSA form drop-down menu, which includes a direct link to the form itself and more information about the FAFSA. So you'll see that FAFSA form link on the page up in the upper left. Next, you have the Loans and Grants tab. That's the one right next to it, which gives you more information about the federal loans and grants that are available and include a federal student aid estimator and loan simulator. So those are fun little tools to play with. Next, you have tabs for loan repayment, you'll see up there, and loan forgiveness. So these contain information that will help you if you choose to take out federal loans. So as you can see, the federal website is fairly straightforward. You kind of just click around where you need to go, and you'll find information right there. But yeah, don't feel afraid to reach out to someone if you do get lost. There's a lot of information there. So I think we can move on now. So Tim, you can return to the presentation. Thank you. All right. So we've discussed a lot of information today, and I know I rushed a little bit in the beginning, so we're going to do a bit of a brief review right now. So first, we talked about the average cost of returning to school. We defined cost of attendance and explained the difference between direct and indirect costs. We determined that your individual cost of attendance will vary depending on your circumstances, the school you choose, and the program you enroll in. Next, we talked about affordability. How can you take that cost and make school more affordable to you? We talked about the partnership's tuition benefits and earning credits by examination. We also talked about lowering the cost of school by choosing the right institution and the right place for you, and considering what you can afford if you choose to pay as you go. And then finally, we mentioned education tax credits. Then, our last topic was assistance or financial aid. Financial aid closes or narrows the gap between the cost of attendance and the affordability we discussed in the first two sections. We talked about the various types of financial aid, including grants, scholarships, and loans, and we explained briefly how you apply for it. Please remember that all this information and more is also contained within your handout. The truth is we could spend much longer talking about each one of these topics, but going further in depth requires a personal conversation. So that's why I recommend that you reach out to a partnership educational advisor to have a further conversation about this. And you can also have this conversation with your school as well. If you're still wondering if returning to school is within your reach for you, or you want to talk about your specific circumstances, feel free to give us a call. So we actually went through this webinar fairly quickly, definitely quicker than we normally do. So we actually have a little bit of time here. So if anyone has any questions, how do you get credit by examination? So that is a great question. Feel free to type in any questions you have in the chat box. We have until 11, so I think we have some time to answer questions if anyone's interested. But regarding the credit by examination, there are a couple specific examinations that we do cover. The big one I know about is CLEP, so C-L-E-P. CLEP is one of the big credit by exams. They do, for instance, a test on, say, English literature. And so you would sign up for that. You would take that exam, you would show and you would demonstrate your knowledge. It would then be reviewed by the CLEP board. They would determine what, if any, credits you would get for that. And then you would take that information over to the school to transfer those credits directly in. So how many credits are required for each degree? Again, that's a great question. And it's also one that's fairly personal as well. So depending on the program and the school, it's really going to determine how many credits. Though generally speaking, associate's degrees, generally around 50 to 60 credits. It's usually about half of a bachelor's degree. Bachelor's degree is typically around 120 credits. But again, there are also certificates, and certificates are smaller, and those can be anywhere from like 10 credits to 30. We do financial aid for all of those. So truthfully, you may be able to find a degree based around your situation. So if you determine that the costs and everything don't line up for what you initially thought, you may also be able to look at other smaller degrees or certificates to do it instead. So good question. Okay, so regarding federal loans, if they are taken out and you remain a public employee, how long is their remain? So that is definitely one you'll want to check the website. I want to say the last time I looked at this, it was something like 10 years. But that stuff fluctuates pretty frequently, and and part of the problem is that the federal government can kind of change those regulations. So you always want to be checking on that on the actual website for the most up-to-date information. But I think it might be 10 years right now. And then, is it the entire amount? Again, you'd want to look at the specifics. I believe it is, with possible, with exceptions. But generally speaking, I believe the point of the program, yes, is to cover your loans in their entirety after working in a nonprofit for, I believe, 10 years. But yes, I would actually highly recommend going to the FAFSA website and taking a look at that loan forgiveness section in the website. I think that'll actually provide you with a lot of good information. These are great questions, by the way, so feel free to keep sending them.
There was another question there, Jeff. Are you able to get a degree not based on any specific field?
Yes, actually. So if you were just doing, say, a general associate's degree, just sort of getting the generals out of the way, yes, that is covered as well. So generally it's just called an associate's degree. I believe they just have a general one. And so that's typically around 50, 60 credits. Again, you'd want to talk to the specific schools for all the specifics, but usually you would have a pretty large selection of courses. You would have to meet certain requirements, make sure you're taking courses in certain areas. But again, depending on the school, they would walk you through that process and they would help you make sure that you're registering for the correct courses. But yes, those general degrees are covered through financial aid and through the partnership as well. And a lot of times those, when you get that 2-year degree of a general associate's, it's oftentimes possible to transfer those in to a 4-year degree to continue on with something specific. So is it possible to do entirely online? or also school dependent. Yep, it is school dependent. You're gonna notice the pattern here that a lot of these questions end up being very school dependent. But yes, there are definitely schools out there that do entirely online programs, and we do cover those. So you'd want to reach out to us certainly if you have a specific school in mind. But absolutely in places like Empire and there's actually, I believe SUNY has a search function on their main page that you can actually select just online programs. And you can see a list of the available online programs only through SUNY. So yes, there are online only programs that I would definitely recommend. Ooh, loaded question, love it. Okay, so let's see, part-time, it might give me, yes, right. Ah.
I think this might be better for a call to an advisor, Jeff, maybe.
Yep, I believe this is personal enough that you'd want to reach out to an advisor directly, but I would also recommend in this case potentially talking to CMO, the Career Mobility Office. So for anyone who isn't aware of it, there is a New York State office that is basically built around assisting New York State employees in progressing through their career and getting themselves situated to move into a new position. And so your question may be actually best suited for them, as they may be able to kind of tell you, talk about the specifics of the requirements of programs and things like that. And so CMO, Career Mobility Office, but again, you can reach out to us, the advisors directly. We can talk through what we know with you, and then we'll refer you on to the next step for them. But yeah, that's a really good question and definitely one that is worth considering because yes, obviously things change over time, and if it takes you a certain amount of time to get that degree, will it be worth that investment? And so luckily, in one sense, the state moves slow. And so in all likelihood, the requirements won't change that quickly. But that being said, it is definitely something to keep in mind. And so talking to the CMO office or us for more information on that, highly recommended. Thank you, Sven. That was really good. So just in case anyone didn't notice, we now have the screen with our contact information up on the page. So advisors at nyscsdapartnership.org. That goes to three of us advisors, Lisa, Dawn, and myself. We are checking that constantly, so don't be afraid if you want to send us an email. We'll get back to you really quick. Same with phone. If we are not available, just leave your name and number as a message, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. Thank you, Harriet. I'm glad this has been informative for everyone. If you want, you're welcome to stick around to talk a little more. Tim, is there anything else you wanted to add?
No, just that it's impossible to share one size fits all like we talked about, and we really encourage everybody to reach out for the advisors with their specific questions.
Thank you, Tim, for hosting. Thank you, everyone, for attending. As I said, I believe we'll be here for a couple more minutes since we are scheduled till 11, so you're welcome to stick around. But otherwise, I think we can probably let them go. Is that correct, Tim?
Yeah, just log out whenever you like to, but we will stick around, Jeff and I, and answer any questions. Go ahead and let us know in the text chat area if you have any, and we'll be happy to stay for as long as we have questions. Just want to let you know when you log out of the webinar, another screen will open with an evaluation for you to fill out. It's okay to fill out that evaluation. It's on the state network. It's safe for your computer. Please go ahead and fill that evaluation out. We do pay attention to the results of our evaluations. We take them very seriously, and we do modify and change and improve classes based upon what people tell us. Also,